Hello, and welcome to the very first episode of Golden Apple's Gutter Gab. My name's Joseph.
And I'm Nick. On today's show, we've got Gerry Duggan, writer for both Marvel and Image Comics, and former Golden Apple employee, and we're excited to have him.
This video highlights a fraction of our conversation. To hear the full interview, visit goldenapplecomics.com and click the podcast tab, or search for Golden Apple Gutter Gab wherever you listen to podcasts. How has your shelter in place been going?
Work has been slower. It's a lot harder to sit around and imagine ways to destroy the world when the world seems to be doing a fine job of that on its own. But I have been writing a bunch, and not just my in-progress stuff with Marvel and Image, but a lot of new material. Some artists that I've been making kissy faces at for a while that now all of a sudden have a little bit of free time. So we're making the most of that. Say pandemic romance.
Suddenly, there's no excuse to not get pages back right away.
Well, it's funny. I mean, that is the way that you would think that it would work. But everyone sort of apologizes whenever anyone shares anything. Like, sorry, this is coming in a little slow, and all anyone does is just shrug and go, yeah, it's all right. Like, it's what happens now. I think for real, we all have to be good, not just to each other, but to ourselves. There are definitely, I made a point of trying to never sit in front of a computer with that blinking cursor mocking me, as I was not typing. I would go away, do something else, go read a comic, go take a walk, go to the movie, do whatever, and then sort of be inspired and run back to the computer. Those days, those things are a little bit harder now to sort of to do.
So you started working at Golden Apple Comics in 1998, is that correct?
I got out to Los Angeles in '98. I walked. I didn't have a car, so I walked up Melrose from Waring in June was my first apartment. This little place that my college roommate was renting. He was doing medical props on ER at the time, and he was only getting like 1 day a week. But that 1 day was sort of almost paying for like a month while he was pursuing other things. And he wrote me, or he called me, and he said, "I'm not going to be able to make September rent. Do you want to come out?" And I said, "You know what? I can always go back home. Of course, I'm coming out there." And the 2 months that I had agreed to cover the rent turned into 20 plus years and a career and family. So it was the best thing I ever did. It was kind of the scariest thing I ever did. But without a car, I knew I had to find a job that would allow me to save for a car, and then sort of once I had the car, I could sort of pursue production work. I had no idea Golden Apple was there, and I almost turned around and walked back on the other side of the street when I saw Golden Apple. I was like, "What is that?" And I walk in. There's no help wanted sign in the window. They directed me back to Bill's office. This was the location when it was closer to Fairfax High. Bill and I talked for a few minutes. He said, I said, "Could I leave my number if you are hiring?" He goes, "I'm going to try you for 2 weeks." And that changed my life. That not just gave me the opportunity to have a job to live out here, but also I thought I needed this starter job to eventually get into production. But that was right when Sauron's eye was sort of falling over comics. And all of a sudden there were people who I didn't know, but very clearly would come to understand that these were people that were making things. They were like, "I need 10 copies of Hellblazer." And I didn't ask why. I just made sure that they had 10 copies of Hellblazer because that's what they needed for work. So all of a sudden, Hollywood was walking in that door. It was a fun time. I mean, I just tried to be a good back issue guy. And then that was enough that everyone was like, "Oh, you need to know where Nebula first appeared. You better go talk to that ding dong."
So how long did you actually stay employed at Golden Apple?
I think I was there for 2 stints. I think I worked there about 2 years. Brian and Patton Oswalt and Brian Posein came in. The Mr. Show guys were buying their comic books there, and they had they had a live show at the HBO Workspace down the street, and they were putting up a show called Super Nerds, where they played two back issue clerks in a comic shop. and they were getting a pilot that Odenkirk was going to direct for Comedy Central, and they had no budget to make the set look like a real comic shop, and it was a 4-air pilot. So if the series got picked up, that was going to be the first episode. So you couldn't really fake it, or you could have, but like, who has time to make 30 superheroes or whatever? So Bill allowed me, Bill and Ryan, to use the contacts through the store to ask people that own their own stuff, would you allow, hey, Mike Mignola, would you allow Hellboy to be on the set? All of a sudden, one yes led to another yes, led to, we were able to borrow and buy stuff from the shop to put on the set so that it looked real. The show didn't go anywhere, but that was all of a sudden, then that production company started giving me more work. That was where I first did some writing, and I thought, oh, you know what, I can do it. And that's really where I started to get the confidence to be able to even write my own comics. Those were early days. I mean, we were going to San Diego Comic-Con and getting a hotel room the night of. It was like, it was a much different era, 2002, 2000. And then I actually, when that production company folded, Bill gave me more hours. So it was great. Golden Apple has been such an important part of my life in Hollywood. If Bill doesn't hire me that day, there are other universes where I definitely went back to New Jersey and was trying to figure out the next move.
It's funny how life works out that way.
You met Brian Posein while working at Golden Apple.
Yep.
How did that morph into collaborating on writing comics together?
He and I bonded pretty quickly. He was my type of dumb and way smarter than me. So it was, he just, everything made me laugh. And then obviously being invited, it's tough because at Golden Apple, you want to like let people, like, they're not here to talk to me. It's not the Gerry Duggan show. Like,
right.
Buy your comics and get out. These guys were interested in going, hey, could you help us do this other thing? And then sort of go, oh, this guy's kind of funny. Maybe we can keep him around. Like, he has a modicum of talent and he works hard. It was a thing that fit well into that particular production office too. They were very busy at the time and just needed bodies that they could trust. But with Brian and I specifically, I think it was our like pop culture reaction to, let me rewind. Our friendship was very fast. The thing that we started talking about, we had this idea about Santa Claus after the apocalypse, and it was sweet and it was funny when it was super messed up, and we wrote it as though somebody might go, hey, this is a $200 million live action movie, not even sort of thinking how dumb that was. But that, like, on the other side of it, we'd met all these friends that were artists where we go, hey, we could just do this ourselves. It was, and Rick Remender, who, that was the last thing he illustrated really, that he was all about the DIY stuff. So we were cooking that up together, and Rick really made that his own. And that all of a sudden gave us something to hand to an editor to go, this is the right opportunity. Now look, even with Brian, who at that point his TV star was really rising, it still took us 5 years to break in to having any kind of Marvel or DC work. The funny thing about that was back then the editors were like, maybe we could try you on a Deadpool mini. And at that time they sort of changed course pretty quickly to say, you know what, Deadpool's not really selling well as mini. Like, so it took for Marvel Now to happen where they thought, hey, here's an opportunity. We're shuffling the creative teams at Marvel. Is there a place for these two ding-dongs to come in? And we worked really hard at it, but they also gave us every opportunity to succeed. We had Jeff Darrow on covers, and we had Tony Moore on interiors. So yeah. I mean, it was once again, it was ours to cock up, and hopefully we didn't.
If we could shift gears a little bit to your more current, ongoing stuff. I'm a big fan of Marauders, by the way. I think that's been great, and I just wanted to ask you because I have this impression of Jonathan Hickman where he's in like some panic room and there's charts everywhere and stuff like that. I was wondering how closely, if at all, do you consult with him on working on the X titles?
You know what, Jonathan? I fell in love with Jonathan's story I think October of 2018 is when I first heard the pitch in the Marvel editorial retreat, and I just fell head over heels. The thought of joining it wasn't even in my head at that point. It was a little bittersweet because I thought, oh, you know what, I'm not going to be able to experience this cold. And I still did anyway. Like I loved picking up those issues. We actually, I've been lucky enough to work with Jonathan now and Jordan and all the other writers on Krakoa, and we work really closely with each other. We have a way of communicating. We have that, basically an IM open all day long. Each title has its own channel, and when you have something that you want to call attention to, you shout it out. There are definitely times when I've needed a name or a sentence or an idea and didn't have it, and it was provided back to me. Jonathan would not consider himself a showrunner, but it's his story. It's just such a big story that he's left all of us such huge plots of this island to tell our stories. So we communicate a lot. Actually, we're probably going to do like a Zoom retreat in the next couple of weeks.
Awesome. One of the things I really like about your writing is that it has a really conversational kind of feel to it, at least in my opinion. And I was wondering, do you ever like practice the dialogue, so to speak? Because it doesn't feel like a script, but I mean that in a good way.
Oh, well, thanks. You know what? I think my history as a acting student, I do try to, the script is kind of a living document for a good long while. I'm just trying to write the story that the artist will tell. And a lot of the times the jokes or the balloons or the boxes or whatever's on the page are there from the beginning. However, more often than not, it's all temp. It would be Kate is mad, is all it would say there. And then the joke will show up later or the line will show up later. And it when I say living document, the artist may or may not know exactly what it is. It often doesn't show up until I'm doing a lettering pass, when I'm actually sitting in front of the big iMac monitor with the script on one side and the finished art on the other. And then it actually is, that's where the Attack of the Show DNA comes in, where you're just trying to make it punchier, make it shorter, hopefully too, cover less art. And I turn two sentences into one, and then I read it out loud. So that's maybe what you're feeling is I just go, well, how does that actually sound? And there's a million times where I go, oh my God, to say that out loud feels awful. And then all of a sudden you figure out, well, what's the distilled version of it? And especially if you're trying to write comedy, it is comedy. The irony is comedy is very unfun to make. It takes a long time. You sit there and you get angry at yourself and think about all your past failures, and then suddenly things are funny again.
We have about 30 seconds left if there's any final thoughts that you want to kick out there, Gerry.
I just wanted to say hi to everyone out there and say I know that these days, by and large are weird days. I hope they're not. I know they can be stressful, but we are all going to get through this.
Ooh, looks like we're out of time. Thanks, Gerry, for joining us today.
We do hope that everybody is making it through this time okay.
We'll see you on the next episode of Golden Apple's Gutter Gab.